again. Today we are going to talk about finding pleasure in now lesson 8. So pleasure is one of the most fun things about intuitive eating, because before eating intuitively, maybe you didn't have much pleasure in food, or you didn't quite know how to look for it, or maybe that you were even allowed to look for it. So today we want you to know that you are definitely allowed and encouraged to find pleasure in food, and we are going to show you with 4 steps how to do that in a way that feels very fun and balanced and even exciting. So the 4 steps that we're going to go through today are determining what sounds good to you for step number 1. Step number 2 is going to be beautifying your environment, so your eating environment. Step number 3 is going to be really learning what it feels like to focus on how you feel when you eat. Step number 4 is going to be balancing pleasure with food with life pleasures.
Step number 1 is determining what sounds good. Like Paige mentioned, this lesson is like one of the most fun for intuitive eating. Pleasure is one of the core principles of intuitive eating, and whatever end of the spectrum you're coming from, whether perhaps you've been over dieting and you didn't even know that you were allowed to experience pleasure in food, or you were afraid of feeling out of control if you did experience pleasure, or if you're coming from the other end of the spectrum where you feel like you are overindulging and are maybe even afraid of pleasure from that perspective because you feel as though eating healthy foods means that you wouldn't experience pleasure. We want to help you come to the middle where you're having pleasure in your body when you're eating. You're having pleasure when you're eating something like a hearty veggie stew, or pleasure when you're eating something like a double chocolate macaroon. So wherever you are when you're intuitive eating, pleasure is going to be a focus. When you begin to look for pleasure in food, the first thing that you have to do is figure out like what the heck sounds good. And that is a process. It changes, your body changes, your taste bud change. So it's never something that you want to stop doing. You always want to be checking in with yourself. There's a few questions that you can ask yourself to help figure out what truly does sound good. The first is think about texture. Are you looking for something that's really creamy? Are you looking for something that's crunchy? Do you want something hot? Do you want something cold? It's currently like negative temperatures in Ohio when we're filming, and perhaps hot tea sounds better than a cold glass of ice water because our bodies are just like so freezing right now. So you want to check in and say like, what would feel good? What sounds good? Do you want something heavy? Are you looking for something light? Do you want a meal that's a little bit larger, a little bit heartier? Are you looking for a snack that's a little bit smaller, that's just going to tide you over for a little bit? So think about those things: taste, texture, flavor, sweet, salty, bitter. What is it that's sounding really, really good? And you can just run through those questions in your mind every time that you start to feel a little hunger. And when your body says like, hey, can I have something sour? And you respond with a food that's sour, then you're gonna feel way more satisfied than if your body says like, hey, can I have something sour? And you give your body something sweet or something salty. So there's a lot of pleasure in feeling satisfied. So you really wanna make sure that you are honoring that.
Yeah.
We do not want you to settle for foods that you don't like. If you do not like kale, we're not telling you to eat kale. If you don't like cupcakes, we're not telling you to eat cupcakes. Before intuitive eating, I used to think that I liked kale in my smoothies because it was really healthy, so I would throw them in there. When I started intuitive eating, I was like, this tastes like feet. This is disgusting. So I stopped putting kale in my smoothies because it tasted nasty to me. You may love kale in your smoothies. I don't know. You have to figure that out for yourself. So you really want to determine like what the heck you like, and only eat foods that you like. There are thousands of food. There's so many vegetables. There's so many grains. There's so many proteins. There's so many types of food, so many flavors, so many textures that it's just not worth wasting your time or, wasting pleasure eating something that doesn't taste good. It's such a waste. So we really want to encourage you to eat only foods that you like. And if there's something that you don't like or isn't pleasurable to you, just ditch it. Along those lines, when you start eating intuitively, you may eat something that you had previously eaten where you thought, maybe you used to think that you liked it, or you ate it because it was healthy, like I was talking about the kale and the smoothies, but it could also be something like a chocolate chip cookie. Maybe chocolate chip cookies used to be something that you would eat and, maybe overeat and you thought they were so good. But when you actually start tasting your food and you actually start checking in with yourself, you realize you're really not a chocolate chip cookie person at all. And you'd much prefer to have ice cream or some sort of like fruity candy or something like that. And so as you notice this, maybe you're like 2 bites into that chocolate chip cookie, or you're a few sips into the smoothie, whatever it is, you haven't finished it, you just had a few bites and you realize it. You're like, crap, this isn't as good as I thought it was gonna taste. It is okay, you have permission to stop right there. We don't want you to eat another bite if it doesn't taste good. You're allowed to stop a few bites in, wrap it up, save it for someone who might enjoy it, throw it out if you know it's not going to feel satisfying to you, whatever. You don't have to keep going. You have permission, and you are empowered to stop if something does not taste good. So just like it's important to figure out before you start eating what you think you want and to honor that, it's also important to check in with yourself during the meal. And if something is not tasting good, just stop and switch to something different that'll be satisfying, will give you pleasure, but also actually taste good in the moment.
Yeah. And I think to go off of what Simi's saying, it's going to happen a lot when you first start eating intuitively, right? Like now that I've been eating intuitively for a few years, that doesn't happen as often because I know most things that I like and don't like now, but it still happens sometimes. But in the very beginning, there's probably going to be quite a few things that you think you start to make and you start eating them and you decide, oh, this is not what I wanted. This is not as exciting as I thought it was going to be. And that is so normal. And like Simi says, you have full permission to stop and switch to something else. So another part of determining what sounds good is really being able to slow down enough that you can notice what does and doesn't sound good. So if you make something and you're just whipping through it really quick, you're probably not paying attention to if you even like it. So we want you to kind of, in a way, discover your own picky palate. Like, I do like this, I don't like this that much, I'm gonna eat more of this food and less of that food. Just create your own. Basically, it's completely fine if you think you used to love kale in smoothies because it was so healthy and now you don't wanna do it, even if everybody else you hang out with has kale in their smoothies. It's not something that you have to do at all. So slow down enough to determine what really sounds good. And it's completely okay if you learn that a food you used to like is not your favorite thing anymore.
Yeah, and as you're really getting in touch with what sounds good, give yourself permission to invest in high quality ingredients for yourself. Because like we were talking about, let's just use the chocolate chip cookie example. Maybe you've been buying these like boxed chocolate chip cookies, and when you start intuitive eating, you realize that they are actually like crunchier or drier or waxier than like what you would like. But there's a local bakery that makes these fresh chocolate chip cookies, or your grandma has this incredible family recipe, and those chocolate chip cookies are amazing. Give yourself permission to enjoy the chocolate chip cookies that you really like, the ones with the higher quality ingredients, the ones with the grass-fed butter, and the rich, deep, dark chocolate chips, and the high quality flours, or whatever it is, or to really, really enjoy those high quality things. So I know that Paige shared her story with like Cadbury eggs before, but maybe you realize that a drugstore candy doesn't actually taste that good to you like you used to think that it did, but you still really love chocolate. You love like an expensive bar of like Vosges chocolate or something like that. That's awesome. You want to be eating the highest quality ingredients that you can find. And that includes your treats. Like, make those really, really special. Invest in those high quality ingredients. You're totally worth it.
Yeah, and definitely realize that you're worth investing in, and you'll feel more special as you're doing that, I think. Okay, step number 2 is beautifying your food environment. So I think this is where it gets really fun. Next time you are out shopping, find things on sale at your favorite stores that make your table really fun. Get yourself a vase or maybe a few colorful napkins that you can have with your meal, maybe a new favorite mug for your coffee. Just anything that makes you feel excited to put things on a plate, cute little bowls that you can put ice cream in or things that are a little bit more indulgent. And just have so much fun with it and make sitting at the table a fun eating experience. So we want to point out that when you're eating, you need to be thinking of your 5 senses. So that is taste, sight, smell, touch, and even the sound of what you're eating. Those things will all satisfy you. So for example, you might be feeling like you want to be eating a meal that you need a fork to eat it. So making yourself like pasta or something that's fun to spin around on the fork. Other times you're going to be feeling like, I really want something that I can pick up right now, like a sandwich or a burrito. Be thinking of all of those senses when you're trying to decide what sounds really good to you. It will make your whole eating experience more fun, and then just go with it.
Definitely. Some of my favorite things to do, like beautifying your food environment, would be to light a candle. I love putting music on in the background. I'm someone who definitely used to always eat in front of the TV, and I think I just craved that background noise. And so now it's really fun to put on relaxing music that doesn't take me away from my food. It's not distracting like the TV, but it still makes me feel really, really comforted to have that background noise. And I love, like Paige was saying, getting things on sale. I love to hit up the Anthropologie sale table. They always have the most amazing like home goods on sale, pretty plates, candle holders, like amazing platters and stuff like that. That's my favorite place to go and buy like fun salesy things for my kitchen. Also, we really want you to treat yourself like you're at a restaurant. So you want to set the table for yourself, really get into that environment. It's fun when you're trying to figure out what you like. Paige has mentioned in previous lessons that it's great to, when you're at a restaurant that you love, pick up on the things that they do. How do they plate their food there? What's the environment like? Do you like it because the lights are kind of dim? Do you like it because the lighting's bright? Do they have loud music on? Do they have soft music on? Do they use cloth napkins? Like, what is it that's going on there, and try and recreate it. Another great place for inspiration is Pinterest. You can hop on and look at kitchen layouts and table designs and all of those things to give you ideas. It's fun. It doesn't cost any money to do that. And you can really imagine in your mind like what the perfect table setup would be, and then recreate that for yourself at home. You'll enjoy cooking. You'll enjoy eating at home so much more if it feels special.
Yeah, and I think it's so it's so good to get excited about home cooking too. Sometimes like when you're thinking about home cooking and you can only cook like super healthy recipes that are super low calories, or you're used to just cooking like boxed food that's already halfway prepared and you're just heating it in the microwave, like there's not that much pleasure in doing that. So when you get to say, that sandwich looks so good, I'm gonna recreate that at home, like I'm gonna spend time cutting up vegetables and things and putting it on there and getting excited about all of this color, and you're getting to try new things that are still very simple, that is really encouraging to want to have fun and cook at home and treat yourself just better, spend more time on yourself. And then I don't want to say spend too much time on making your meal, but when you put a little bit more effort into it, you're so much more likely to spend a little bit more time eating it and caring about it when you are eating it. Step number 3 is thinking about how you want to feel. So when you're eating, you want to get into the habit of asking yourself, how do I want to feel when this is done? Maybe even just have a meal tonight. Practice asking yourself that question, and once you're done eating, ask yourself, am I happy with the way I'm feeling? Do I like this feeling? Would I want to have this feeling again? But just really getting in that habit of saying, how do I want to feel when this is done? So that you can have things that are a little bit more indulgent and it won't be so scary. because you can say, okay, I'm about to have this pizza. My experience has been that when I eat pizza, I feel not very good afterwards because maybe I eat the whole thing or I eat too many slices. So I think I can't have pizza. Now we want you to, when you get a craving for pizza, give yourself permission to have that food and just practice asking yourself, how do I want to feel when this is done? What would it look like for me to feel really good? Or what do I think it would look like? And really not place any expectations on yourself there. So sometimes I think, and I've definitely experienced for myself, that it sounds really fun to eat something. So for example, frozen yogurt. You might be going with your friends and there's a very high feeling like, yes, we're gonna go get frozen yogurt. I don't even care right now. I'm gonna get all the toppings. I am going to fill it up. That would be so fun. We want you to ask yourself, okay, that sounds really fun. If I were to do that, how would I feel afterwards? And just practice asking yourself that. For myself, I know that I've experienced for sure with frozen yogurt, getting so much frozen yogurt and thinking it sounded like the most fun event, eating it so fast, and then afterwards finding that I felt like total crap afterwards, like such an upset stomach, just not feeling good, not being able to sleep well. So then I could ask myself, do I like the way I'm feeling? Would I want to have this feeling again tomorrow or in the future? And I could definitely say no. That's now I'm not feeling like this is as fun as I thought it was going to be. I would have had so much more fun if I could have said yes to frozen yogurt and focused more on my friends and still really enjoying the food, but getting an amount that would leave me feeling really good so that I could trust myself, that I could always go to frozen yogurt. I can always eat it in a way that feels balanced, and I can still feel so good afterwards and be able to continue hanging out with my friends.
Totally. And I think that's just such a perfect example of how intuitive eating is not about giving up your favorite things. Mm-hmm. It's about enjoying those things in a way that not only tastes good, but also feels good to your body. So perhaps you are someone who's like a little skeptical of this approach because maybe you're someone who really, really, really enjoys food. And the reason that you're doing this program is because you're struggling with your weight or you're struggling with overindulging on a regular basis and you're just feeling like, oh, I love food. I find so much pleasure in food. Like, that's my problem. I can't stop eating. Like, I love to sit in front of the TV and eat. Like, I am having fun when I'm doing that. I am experiencing pleasure every single time when I eat. And it almost feels like you are like overwhelmed with pleasure, but maybe at the same time a little afraid to give up some of that pleasure by eating more healthy foods, which in your mind perhaps seems like they don't carry any pleasure along with them. Mm-hmm. And it's important to think about how you want to feel when you're done eating. This is such a key principle here, because eating pizza is totally okay. Pizza isn't good or bad. It isn't right or wrong. It's just pizza. If pizza sounds good to you and that's like what you really want, like, we encourage you to sit down with pizza. But we want you to think before you eat, how do I want to feel when this is done? Do I want to feel satisfied? Do I want to feel light? Do I want to feel good in my body? Do I want to feel confident? Maybe you're going out on a date and it's like, after this date, like, I want to feel confident enough to like have sex with my partner. So I don't want to feel like super bloated or really like heavy or weighed down. Thinking about those kinds of things. So then when you're eating that pizza, you're still enjoying the flavors of the pizza. You're still eating to a place where you're satisfied, but you're not overeating to a point where you've missed out on that amazing feeling afterwards too. Mm-hmm. So it's thinking about the food, but it's also thinking about your body. And this can be a struggle for women who do not have high self-esteem. This can happen to women at any weight. You can be underweight and have low self-esteem, but oftentimes when you feel like you need to lose weight or want to lose weight, when you're feeling not great about your body, like you're not good enough or there's changes that you need to make, there's oftentimes a lot of negative feelings about your body, right? Like, you are angry at your body, you think it's gross, you think it's disgusting, you think it's fat, you don't feel good about yourself. And it's especially hard to try and think about making your body feel good, right? Because you don't particularly like her. It's sort of like having an enemy. You don't really care to make your enemy's life easier. So that's why the emotional, like mental component of intuitive eating is so important, because we want you to care enough about your body that one of the factors that you're taking into consideration when you're making food choices is how she's going to feel. That's why it's important for your body not to be your enemy. If you have a best friend, you go out of your way to make sure that she feels loved and supported and really encouraged. You don't do nasty things to her. So when you care enough about your body to say, okay, this tastes really good, I also know that I want my body to feel really good because I care about her, I'm gonna stop after this second piece. Because this is my happy place where there's pleasure in my taste buds and there's pleasure in my body, and it's sort of meeting. So if you find yourself thinking, well, I have an overabundance of pleasure, that's why I'm in this program, like I like food way too much, then we want you to think about it on the second layer too. How is your body feeling? Because that pleasure is coming purely from your taste buds. Where's that pleasure piece in your body? And start really digging deep into this question about how you want to feel when you're done eating, because that's where the magic happens.
Now we are on step number 4, which is finding balance in pleasure with food and pleasure in your life. So 2 things we want to introduce to you today are actually the same thing, but 2 different names: primary foods, and then Simi likes to call them soul foods. So in step number 3, Simi talked a little bit about, like, what if I have so much pleasure in food that I don't want to give it up? We want to show you that you can have pleasure in both food and primary food things, which are relationships, career, spirituality, finances, and even just watching TV and the physical things that you're doing. So we want you to know that when you, for example, separate food from watching TV, both things can still be super fun. So they might not be together, but you can still experience just as much pleasure, if not even more, with having pleasure in your food and then moving on to the TV and having so much pleasure in the TV and your favorite show and laughing and cuddling with a blanket. There's other things that you can do to still keep that same amount of pleasure, and if not more, in that.
Absolutely. What we talk about, like being primary foods and soul foods, if you think about food on your plate, like that's feeding your belly. That's, nourishing your body. But then there are other things that nourish our souls. So our relationships, all the stuff that Paige just talked about. And sometimes when our pleasure meter is low in those areas, food is an easily accessible pleasure. There's a grocery store is always 1 block away. There's always a McDonald's around the corner. There's always a restaurant that you can go out to eat to. There's always a box of cookies in the cabinet. Like, those are things that are right there. No one's going to deny that food is pleasurable. We certainly are the first people to say that food should be full of pleasure. If you don't get pleasure out of it, skip that food, move on to something that you enjoy. But it can't be your only source of pleasure. And so when you find yourself only going to food for pleasure, you want to look at the other areas of your life. And so we would encourage you to think through your life, think through your relationships, think through your career, think through, like, when was the last time that you had a lot of fun without food? What are the things in your life that are just ridiculously fun? Where does your pleasure come from? How would you rate your joy in life? Really think about that stuff, and you may be surprised by the answer. I know the first time I got asked that, I was like, oh shit, I don't have a lot of joy in my life. And a lot of times my clients have the same reactions. We talk about that in the very first session. What do all areas of your life look like? How would you rate those on a scale of 1 to 10? If it's a 2, what would a 10 look like? When you really examine your life, you may realize that your joy, your pleasure is very low. And so that's something that we want to work on, because those voids, if you don't have a lot of deep relationships, if you're unhappy in your job, if you're feeling really stressed out, those kinds of things, those are voids, those are areas of emptiness that food cannot fill in the long run. For a moment, food can trigger your brain to feel happy. It can, obviously make you feel pleasure in that one moment, but food is not a sustained pleasure. It's very momentary. So if you have areas in your life that are lacking, we have to stop trying to fill those voids with food pleasure and start filling them with the appropriate kind of pleasure. So if your friendships are lacking depth, then we have to fill those with really quality friendships, that kind of thing. It's the same way that if your belly is really, really hungry, then getting a great new job isn't going to fill your hunger. It goes both ways. So figure out those areas in your life outside of your plate that are lacking pleasure, and really set some time aside to journal about those things and think about, okay, if I'm rating this a 2 or a 3 out of a 10, what would a 10 look like? And slowly work on those one at a time to build that pleasure up. It'll reduce a lot of emotional eating. It'll reduce a lot of binge eating. It will allow you to see food as just food, which is in itself a pleasure, but certainly not the only pleasure in life.
And there's definitely a reason why these relationships and careers and activities, hobbies that you're doing are called primary foods, because food is supposed to be secondary. So you can even think of it the other way, that when you're too focused on food, or you're too full of food, like you've eaten so much food, it's really hard to focus on the primary things. Like maybe with your partner, you've had way too much food, or you haven't had enough food, and now you're feeling super irritable with them, like something's wrong with them, when really you're just really uncomfortable or too focused on food. So food should be secondary, and we really see that when you increase the primary foods and let those be your primary source of focus, you will naturally start to think about food less, and it will naturally start to take its place and not be so on your mind all the time.
Totally. All right, when I first started intuitive eating and trying to experience pleasure in food, I used to think that the only foods that I felt pleasure in were the foods that I overate. So like baked goods, chips, all of those things. And one of those like trigger overeating foods for me were tortilla chips. I just thought like I could not control myself around tortilla chips. I would eat an entire like big bowl of them, stuff my stomach with them, and you know what happens when you eat too many corn tortilla chips and you like can't go to the bathroom for days, and it's so uncomfortable and you're just like bloated and there's a bag of tortilla chips like stuck in your belly. So anyways, I would experience that. And I just thought those were the most pleasure-filled foods. But when I started intuitive eating, I was shocked to discover that I actually don't like the way tortilla chips taste most of the time. I mean, on occasion, when you go to like an amazing Mexican restaurant and they make their own tortilla chips, that's the exception. Like those I can appreciate and like really enjoy. But the bagged like organic like blue corn tortilla chips that I once thought were like the vein of my existence, I realized that I actually didn't really like. They were really, really dry when I was eating them. They like got stuck in my mouth. They just felt, I did not enjoy the experience of eating them at all. And I realized what I actually enjoyed more was the things that I was dipping them in. So it was easy for me to like switch to vegetables, dip in guacamole to enjoy the guacamole, or start incorporating guacamole into more of my meals so I could have that pleasure more often. And I also found out that the thing that I was probably enjoying so much about tortilla chips was that I could get into a rhythm and just keep eating and eating and eating. And it was sort of like this melodic trance where I could escape from my life. And so it was more of a way to just relax my mind and take me away from from stress than it was that I actually enjoyed tortilla chips. So when I started checking in with that, I realized that what I needed to do was manage my stress better outside of food, get really calm before eating, and then enjoy the foods that I truly like, which just do not happen to be tortilla chips anymore.
My experience with finding pleasure in things other than food came from using food as a distraction or an escape from the things that I did not want to be doing. So schoolwork, stress from a job, trying to remove myself from any stressful situation, I would just kind of run the other way and go towards food because it felt so much more comfortable and it was something that I could enjoy. But what I didn't realize is I could have these other pleasures in life that I went to that made me feel so fulfilled and so much better. The trouble with food is that I would use it and it would feel so good in the moment, which is why I always went back to it. But afterwards, I would always have this feeling like I did not just honor myself. Like, I feel bad right now. It was like I knew that I wasn't paying attention to how I was actually feeling, and I was using food instead to just mask all of that. And then I had to go right back to the same stressful situation. And so it didn't do anything for me. Instead, now I can see that there's other things I can do, like journaling or taking a break or going outside and getting fresh air and removing myself from that situation for a minute. Or even if I can't remove myself from the situation, like if I was babysitting and with kids or anything else that you can't really get out of right away, just kind of like closing your eyes for a minute, taking a deep breath, and just pulling your brain back to a calm place. Just giving yourself that space to relax really helped me. But one thing that I've noticed even through working on this project for you girls is that having things in your life that are big and fulfilling are so exciting. Like, I hardly want to leave my computer to take a break and eat lunch. I have to remind myself because it's such a fun thing to be working on. So things that you can find that bring you pleasure like that you can be doing, you know, most of the time, or at least some of the time, just to give you that fulfillment regularly, are so important. So that might be a relationship, it might be your career, it might be another project, like a completely different kind of project, like sewing or building or decorating or taking pictures, photography, any of those kind of things that give you this sense of fulfillment and doing those things regularly.